Welcome back to another episode of the Moments of Joy podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with us, and her name is Misty Con Snyder. I know that every single time we have a guest, I call them all special, and I'm so excited about every single one, but I can't help it. This mom, I can't even remember exactly how we stumbled upon each other, but I'm pretty sure it was through Instagram Reels. That's where the magic happens. And we tend to always follow people like us, right? Moms who are like us and advocating and sharing stories. And so here we are. Misty, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I actually found you, I think a reel of yours was on the Beauty Mart community page.
Yes.
I saw you and I was so thankful for your honesty and vulnerability and willingness to share.
Yes, thank you. The Beauty Mart community page. Amanda, I met her on Clubhouse, and she would participate sometimes in some of our support groups
She's
because
awesome.
she is, amazing. And so here you are today, and we've kept in touch for quite some time now. And I love you, little guy. I love how you're sharing your story. And let's get into it. And so your page is about Down syndrome. You do a lot of advocacy because your son was born with Down syndrome. And so can you bring us back to that moment where you received his diagnosis?
Yes, I can. It was in March of 2020. I was about 14 weeks pregnant, and it was about 2 weeks before everything shut down.
Wow.
And I was so excited to be pregnant. I'd had a miscarriage before Jed. I have an older son who's almost 5 now, but at the time he was not even 2. Wow. And we were trying to have another baby, and I'd had a miscarriage. So this pregnancy was so wanted and celebrated. And the only reason I decided to do genetic testing was because I was convinced I was having a girl, because everything felt different than it did with my first son. And so I wanted to know, am I having a girl? Because if so, I want all the frilly girl things. Yeah. And so I did genetic testing, and it took a long time for me to hear anything back. And I remember thinking, this is really strange. Why haven't they called me? They even gave me a little portal I could sign on and see. Nothing. There was no results. And on March 6th, 2020, I had gone to I'm a singer, and I was leading a group of women in song at a Bible study. And I came back and was about to take a nap, and I turned my phone off, the ringer off, and out of nowhere, I just shot up and looked at my phone, and sure enough, it said OB. And I picked up the phone. I was so excited. And the other voice on the phone was not excited. I could tell she was nervous. I could tell she was, there was just the whole tone was somber. Yeah. And she sort of told me a few things that came back okay. And then she said, your child is high risk for trisomy 21. And I think I said, oh my God, I just was so, it was so out of left field. I was so not expecting to hear anything like that. And I don't think anybody does. And I said, well, what does that mean? You mean Down syndrome? And she said, yes. I said, well, what do you mean high risk? And she said 9 of 10 chance that your child, well, I think she said your fetus will have Down syndrome. And she was about to hang up. And I said, wait a second, what is the baby? What's the sex of the baby? That's the whole reason I took this test. And she said the fetus is a boy. Wow. And I walked down the stairs, and I was luckily my husband was here, and I just fell into a million pieces at the bottom of the stairs. I threw down my phone and just started sobbing. And all I could think about was My life is over. Every aspiration and dream I've ever had is done. And I will be one of those sacrificial lambs that has to take care of someone for the rest of my life.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
was scared, and my head went to some really dark places. But I'm really grateful that my husband was there to say, this is our child and we will love him. And we just hugged and cried.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here and so relatable. So relatable. But I didn't even want to go forward, but I all I could think about is the joy that you represent now. My goodness. But I can't imagine just the feeling. And I think that I always say, and this is something that I've said to you, that although we have different diagnoses, right? We relate because Down syndrome is what the Lord used to help me to be okay with Mason being autistic. And I shared that
Really?
with you. Yeah, I think I shared it, but you may have forgotten. I said, oh, no. Wow. Yep. One day I was in prayer and I was going through this stage where I was trying to pray it away. And I say that often because as a Christian, I just didn't know. I was just like, well, he can, this is not his reality. I'm going to pray this away. And one day when I was praying for Mason, the Lord said, would you be trying to pray this away if he had Down syndrome? And I sat up on the bed and I was like, no, what do you mean? And then I sat with it. And that's when I began to accept because no, obviously there's nothing I could do. I would then pray over his future, and that shifted my prayers for Mason. Mm-hmm.
Tell me again how old Mason was when you got his diagnosis?
He was almost 2.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't remembered you sharing that with me. That's really powerful because it's interesting how I think God gives you a glimpse of something sometimes before you're ready to accept your own reality. Sometimes he gives you a glimpse of something else to get you ready for it. Because I think he is a gracious God and he does things on his time and not on ours.
Absolutely.
And the night before I got this call that I told you about, I had gone to see a play, a high school production with a friend. And I noticed in the play, it had like 60 kids in it. But I noticed in a big production number that there was a girl with Down syndrome. And I just watched her and watched her and watched her. And I'm an actor and I have never seen a person with Down syndrome on stage. She was the only one I'd seen. So I was watching her and thinking, wow, this director like put her in and like he isn't trying to hide her. She's here, like she's in it. And I remember this joy that sort of like rose up in me. And while I was sitting at the bottom of the stairs crying with my husband, her face came into my mind. Similar to what you're saying, like when you sat up in bed and you're thinking this was Down syndrome. I feel like that was so gracious of God to give me that experience the night before, like to have a real tangible thing to like hold on to. Like I had even said to my friend, wow, she was amazing. Did you see her? She was so great. That was so cool and how inclusive and how wonderful. And I was rejoicing in her life. And here I was with a baby in my belly that I was like devastated. I was terrified. I was so terrified. And God gave me that visual of her face.
Yeah. Because we don't know what the future brings. All of, those thoughts that you described, we just don't know. We're not into advocacy yet. We don't know any groups yet. We just only know what we've seen growing up. And for most of us, we've never been taught anything about, children who are different, anything kind, we just learned along the way. That is absolutely beautiful. So after that moment, what was your husband strong for you, or did he join you in your raw feelings?
So I would say that my husband and I are very different personality wise. So I am all or nothing. So I'm all in or I'm not at all. And my husband's much more like even keel. And so I would say that he remained pretty even keel throughout the pregnancy. And I give him so much credit for that. He had to deal with so many of my tears because in all honesty, I was the one who had to go to the appointments by myself in a pandemic. Yeah. I was the one who had to had no idea what I was going to hear every single appointment. And there were even doctors who were like, you can't even be on the phone with him right now. Wait until after. I never knew what I was going to face. And I think my husband had a lot of grace for that. You were the one in real time dealing with this stuff. And so I think he took on the role of kind of a solid ground emotionally, because I was all over the place. Yeah. And I will say that I think the thing that kind of put us on the same page. So he went from comforting me at the bottom of the stairs and for 2 days I didn't get out of bed. I was crying. I couldn't stop crying. I called people, I reached out, but nothing was helping. And so we found out on a Friday, couldn't get out of bed. Monday, we had an appointment with our genetic counselor, and it was right before the shutdown. So that was the last thing my husband was able to go to. And we went together and we sat in her office. And I remember just praying, it was almost one of those prayers that you don't even realize you're praying. You're just, please God, please God, please God, please God. Right. And I was just praying, please God, help her not be negative about this. I cannot have a doom and gloom experience right now. Please, because I'd heard some horror stories about some genetic counselors. Yeah. And we went in her office and it was the Spirit of God was there with us. She wasn't flowers and rainbows, which would have been amazing. And she wasn't dark. She just was look, here's how it happened. She explained to us the science behind it. Yeah. And nothing you did caused this. It's the moment of conception. And she spoke to fears that I didn't even know I had. And then she started talking about siblings of children with Down syndrome and how they say they are better people because of their siblings. And she started giving some stats and whatever. She picked up on the fact that we were not terminating this pregnancy. So she never, ever brought it up. Right. She did offer me the amnio, but she was a perfect example of I'm going to give you resources. I'm going to give you facts. Right. And I feel we need more doctors and medical professionals to be that way. That yes, it's our choice what we're going to do with that information, but it's important for us to have the full story. And so that's what she gave us. And that was a turning point for me. She told me about the Down Syndrome Diagnosis Network. I got connected with other moms who were pregnant, and I was kind of off to the races at that point. It doesn't mean it wasn't a tremendously hard pregnancy, but something switched at that point. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this.
That was going to be my question next. How was the pregnancy different from your first because of Down syndrome?
I mean, they're not even comparable. I thought there were so many moments in my pregnancy with Jed that I thought, I'm just gonna die. No person can handle this much stress. I remember thinking I'm going to blow up with stress. Yeah. And even after I'd sort of accepted the diagnosis, now it wasn't 100% confirmed until he was born, but I knew. Right. And it was just, the pandemic adds such a specific layer to it. I can't explain, but we all know, I think that's a point that we all had things during the pandemic, whether you lost a loved one and you couldn't go to a funeral, or you were getting married and you couldn't celebrate with your family or whatever. We all had grief during the pandemic. And that added a whole other layer, but just this feeling of I can't even hug anyone. Like I can't hug and cry. I had my husband, of course, and my son, but we were just so isolated.
Yeah.
That feeling of like, I just wish I could have like a group of women just like come over me and pray for me.
Yeah.
I didn't get
Yeah.
that, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
that was really hard. That was, I think the grief that I still have is that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The pandemic was hard. There are so many things. Now I'm seeing so many divorces and popping up, and my response is always, the pandemic was so hard. And people are like, you always say that. I'm like, but it was. It changed people. It made people, look at the face of maybe who they were with, which work separated them for years. And, maybe they were on different schedules. And now they're like, who is this?
Yeah.
Well, it added a lot of pressure in many different ways. And so when you had the baby, what was that like? That moment?
It was like from darkness to light.
Mm-hmm.
He was just the moment I saw him, I was so in love with him. And very similar to my first son, but I didn't have all the fears with my first son that I had with Jet. So I was surprised that I was just instantly in love with him. And that has not been everybody's experience. So I definitely want to make that clear, that many of us talk about the other side. Like in the Down syndrome community, we say the pregnancy is so hard, but wait till the other side. That's not everybody's reality. And the fact of that, the things that I want to speak to on that are many of our children do spend time in the NICU.
Yeah.
My son had 7 days in the NICU, and those days were so brutal, so hard. It's not natural. It's not natural for a mom to have to leave her baby behind. That's not natural. And so that there was grief with that. And I did have moments in the first few weeks where I was just overwhelmed with all the early intervention stuff coming at me. But Chad himself has always been nothing but
joy.
And that's why this is because I was blown away with the joy that he brought to me instantly. From the moment I first held him and he locked eyes with me and like looked in my soul, and I thought, I'm tired. I must be imagining this. Like, he has not blinked. He has not looked away from me once. I must be hallucinating.
Right.
And the next day, my husband was holding him, and I saw tears coming down his face, and he said, he's just staring at me. He's just looking into my soul. And he's such a, I can't say enough about Chet. So he's really special.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to shift the podcast, because before the end of last year, it was a podcast for moms, and I rebranded it to make it for special needs parents, was to hear that story of the diagnosis and the joy that comes after, because it's so relatable, I think, for parents who receive a diagnosis or they may think something's a little different. It's important for them to hear that it's not going to be a doom and gloom story. Even when there may be health conditions and there may be doctor's appointments and therapy, even when, there's happiness and joy.
And in your platform, Moments of Joy, I think the moments is really important.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you're this way, but for me, it was just like an umbrella of hard. Like, it's all going to be hard. My whole existence is going to be hard. Yeah. And the actual truth of it is, there are moments that are really hard. And there are moments that are more joyful than I could ever explain.
Mm-hmm.
So being in the moment, I love that you call it moments of joy, because
Yeah.
when we can take those moments and those nuggets and those glimmers of hope throughout every single day,
Mhm.
those moments of hard can be, can, we can get through those because we
Yeah.
have so many moments of joy, you
Yes.
know? It's brilliant
Absolutely.
the way I love that title because
Thank you so
it's so
much.
true.
I can't take any credit. I was literally sitting on the couch and like, this podcast is 4 years old, and moments of joy. My middle name is Joy, but God knew all the way to here we are today, 4 years later, right? And it didn't even start. It just started with me sharing and telling my testimony. I had no real niche or audience that I was speaking to, but yeah,
That's
that's all
amazing.
for now.
He had a
Yeah.
plan.
We had a plan. Um, I definitely related to the NICU. Mason was in the NICU with his heart condition, 10 days. And so when I came out, I was just so much on autopilot and going and moving and doing what I knew to take care of him and the rest of my family. And I stayed home, I think, for his first 3 months. But what I didn't realize until he was about 2.5 years old was all of that time I was going through postpartum depression. And I didn't know until I came out of it. And I was like, I felt so foggy and not like myself the whole time. I just didn't know because I did bond with my baby. I didn't feel disconnected with Mason. It was just the rest of the world I didn't want to be bothered with. When normally I'm very extroverted, I love people, so I think it's important for us to pay attention to ourselves, even in those moments after, and know that mommy needs care too, because the NICU is a lot,
Mm, it is a
even
lot.
for an extra day.
Oh man, there are people that I meet through Happiness is Down syndrome who've been there for months,
Mm-hmm.
months, and there, if that is a really, really, really specific situation that when people have experienced it, they have to come together because
Mm-hmm.
7 days I thought I was gonna die. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
just my hat is off to the people who have to go through such a long stint there because that is such a specific, really difficult experience.
Yeah, and this is why I always give extra to the Ronald McDonald House now. Growing up and seeing it, I never paid it any attention until I actually participated in going to the house across the street from the hospital.
Oh my gosh. But what was that experience like? Was it
Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. Um, it was a social worker that came in around day 2 and told us that we could go to the Ronald McDonald House. Mason had his surgery at Yale Hospital in Connecticut because we're from Connecticut, and right across the street. You don't have to worry about anything. They feed you. They give you this great big bag of toiletries and snacks and everything else that you can think of. And if you come with other children, they make sure your other children are okay. They have game rooms. They have family meals every night, people on staff to do homework with, so you can, if your child is getting treatment for cancer or having surgery, you can go there and
oh,
be okay.
that sounds amazing.
It's so amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So now I see the little house. I'm like, I'm gonna give my extra dollars because out of sight, out of mind, you have no idea what it's for. Yeah.
Wow.
So let's move on to today.
Yeah.
um what kind of services or interventions, therapies do you have to have for your son?
We have let's see, we have physical therapy, occupational therapy, developmental intervention, what did I miss? OT, PT, DI, and speech. We have
Mm-hmm.
speech. So he has 4 therapies a week, and I have a caseworker who I meet with every other week. We've been really blessed by way of therapies, and that is not the case for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I want to say that. But we have been so blessed in New Jersey, where we currently live. Early intervention is really stellar. In our county is really, really, really good. I felt in so many ways that I was kind of handed a silver platter of wonderful therapists. And as soon as someone would have to leave, they like replaced them, like lickety split. There was never any like lagging. We have been so blessed in that way. And, you know, Jed had infantile spasms at 6 months old and had to miss months of therapies. And his therapists helped him, you know, just step right back up and pick up where we left off. That was really, really hard because.
Are the spasms a part of how Down syndrome sometimes shows up?
So actually, no, they're actually really, really rare. So the infantile spasms for children who don't have Down syndrome, it's usually an indicator of some sort of brain damage. And so they're very, very dangerous in terms of if you don't catch them like quick enough within typical children, because that probably means they have to have an MRI and see what's going on. Within Down syndrome, excuse me, it's rare, but it's not as alarming because their brains are made up differently. And so we had this amazing neurologist, top in her field. She actually ended up leaving the hospital, and now she does research for epilepsy and infantile spasms. She's like a huge, amazing scientist. But she came in and she said, here's what your son has. You caught it early. We're going to do an MRI to make sure there's not a further problem, but I'm fairly confident this is just something that happened. It happens in 6% of children with Down syndrome. And here's how we're going to treat it. And he's going to be great. And we had 8 weeks of very intense treatment, meaning steroids. I mean, huge dosage of steroids. His personality left. He blew up like a balloon. It was so hard. But he had a spasm the day after he came out of the hospital and never again. Praise God. So we are just counting our blessings for that. Again, that is not everybody's experience. Happiness, we have a infantile spasm group if this happens to anyone who listens. But that was hard.
Yeah, so, I can imagine.
But we got through it.
Yeah. I just realized that I didn't ask you what Down syndrome is. I think for a lot of listeners and viewers, we know what Down syndrome is by the look, but we don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
So can you tell us?
Yeah, they have. So we have 46 chromosomes, and our beautiful children have 47, and it just means we talk a lot about extra. So I have an extra chromosome. So, you know, there are health. I want to make this distinction because I think, and especially in the past 2 weeks, there's been a lot of assumptions about Down syndrome that I make it my mission, as I know you do. We want to tell the truth and we want to dispel myths or misconceptions. And, for the longest time, Down syndrome was labeled as like they're sick and suffering. Yeah. And I can't speak for everyone. And I know that there are sick and suffering people with Down syndrome and people who don't have Down syndrome, right? Like there's levels of suffering in every disability, whether it's emotional or physical, but it's the human condition to have suffering. So I just want to say that.
Absolutely.
But there is a blanket statement that because your child has Down syndrome, they are sick. And that is not true. There are plenty of people who have Down syndrome that aren't sick, that live healthy, thriving lives, live to 60 and above. So we have to dispel that myth. There are risks that come with Down syndrome. 50% are born with a heart defect. But that is not a death sentence the way it was in the 50s and before, and the 60s and the 70s. We've come so far. And you know, you can speak to this more than I am sure with a heart condition. Jed does have an ASD, but it's kind of inconsequential. It's so small. So there are heart defects, but we live in a day and age, praise God, where they can fix things, and there's a huge success rate. And those people, Chris Nikic, who runs all the marathons and the Ironman, and he has Down syndrome. He had a heart defect. He had heart surgery, and he's thriving. So we have to dispel that myth that it just automatically comes with sickness. We have to dispel the myth that they can't ever walk or talk or live full lives or get married or any of those things. That's not true. It is not true. So, pretty passionate about that.
Yes. And is that, do you want to speak a little bit about what you've currently been posting reels about and what we've seen on that Netflix show?
Yeah. So, so there's a show on Netflix called Love is Blind, and there were two contestants that were, about to get engaged, and they were discussing if we were to have kids, what would you do if your child had a birth defect, and she specifically mentioned Down syndrome. And the part her potential fiance said, it wouldn't matter to me. I'd take a baby with 4 toes, whatever. He gave a couple examples. It wouldn't matter to me. And she said, for me, it's different. And I want to make sure to give the quote that is bothersome to us. She said, for me, if I knew that I could try again and hope that the second time it's better, then I would go that route. And because she is a speech therapist and because she specifically...
That took my breath away.
Okay, right? So you know what okay. She's a speech therapist. She's worked with many families, she said, Down syndrome. And she said, these families are so, I would come home crying and they're sad and they've suffered trauma, and she's speaking in to our experience.
Yeah.
What I hold issue with is that, number one, we are never to say that one life is better than another. This isn't, the thing that upsets me is that this often becomes politicized. Like I'm saying, you don't have a right, you do have a right, whatever. That's not what this is about. What this is about is, no matter what your stance is politically, it is never okay to say that people who are living right now with Down syndrome are less better than a person with 46 chromosomes. That's not okay. It's not acceptable in 2022. And any other minority group would be up in arms about that kind of statement.
Absolutely.
So it is unacceptable. And as a speech therapist, she might have thought that gave her the authority to speak into our lives, but it does not. It is still a secondhand experience. And the reason I love that you put moments of joy is because we have moments of joy and we have moments of extreme hardship. And for me, if she were my speech therapist and I knew that I'd gone to her with tears in my eyes and gone, we are struggling with this thing and it's so hard, and I'm showing honest, real emotion, and then it's used to say that my life is sad and my child is sad and our experience is sad. I have zero trust for you now, because I have vulnerable moments. Anybody has hard moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are upset. We are upset, and we're asking for some sort of acknowledgement. I've been on the news. I've written to Netflix. I've written to Nancy Rodriguez. She's blocked all of us who've reached out to her. We just want some acknowledgement that our community has been hurt by those statements. And if they want to know about people with Down syndrome, they can come and talk to us.
Yes. And you sharing that is so needed. I saw so many parents and, adults who have Down syndrome sharing the same sentiments, and it is so needed, not just for her to come out and apologize, but for the rest of the world to be educated on what's not okay to say, to have a shift in their mindset, and it's so needed. So thank you so much for your courage.
Thank you for letting me speak on it. And I think we need to be a society that lets the people who have experienced it firsthand speak to it. You know?
Absolutely.
I would never, ever speak into your community without knowing what you've gone through. Never.
Right.
That's why I talk to you, because I'm here to learn, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we should not be discouraged from getting into spaces where our voices can be heard and where they can learn from our experiences. I've been talking to a scientist lately, and she's been speaking to me about the lack of people of color who sign up for studies. So when speech pathologists and people who are going to school to be doctors, they have information on autistic children, it's not from any children that have been Black. And it's because we're not participating in studies. And so
what are you hoping to do?
Yeah, I'm going to, we're right now creatively trying to come up with a way. I probably will have her on the show and come up with a way for parents to begin to participate. It's paid whenever you participate in a study, and it's just to help people who are coming along after. Because I read a lot of studies, and so when I read a study that says parents raising children with special needs have anxiety and depressive symptoms over those who are raising typical children, and that's why it's important to prioritize our mental health. Or I read studies on different things. It hit my heart to know, wow, they're not talking about me or my child, actually. So it really made me want to participate in things like that, and also encourage my community too, because we've not trusted doctors, for good reasons, but we should absolutely participate in things like that.
And it takes someone like you stepping up and saying, let's do this. Let's do this for people like me. Let's do this so that we can change the trajectory. Because like you said, it's going to help over the long haul. If there's a person in your position that can look and go, wow, this study was done, and this is how many people of color participated in that study. That's important to know. There's so much of our journeys are nuanced. And I think that's really important to know. I had a woman reach out to me who's a single mom. And she said, your experience within having your child with Down syndrome is very different than mine. And I'd like you to be able to acknowledge that. And I said, you know what? You're right. I was raised by a single mom. That's not easy. That is not easy. And I can't speak to being a single mom. So you need to.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we have to speak. When we have children who are different, we have to speak. These things are important because they determine dollars that are put into our children. They determine the systems that are put into place to not only diagnose, but to treat. And when neurologists go to test the brain and they've come up with this way of testing, it's not even been counted with you and mine because our hair doesn't fit. Our hair goes against the grain. It's too thick, and sometimes they can't read. So they've not tested us. And the masses, the books that we read, we are not in the number. And so once I took on the heavy weight, I've been taking time to chew on it. And I met with her 3 times so that I could fully grasp, it's hard to take in.
That blows my mind. That is, I wouldn't have even thought of it.
Me either.
That's incredible.
Me either. Just that little piece got me. And, week after week, as she began to tell me more, I was sad, but then I was like, wow, this can make a huge difference once we just share that there's a study that they can participate in.
You are doing such incredible work. I'm so encouraged to hear you digging into that. And I think that's what's so hard is that when you find something new, when you uncover something new, there are layers of pain where you're just like, I'm not seen, I'm not identified. Or like when I realize when I have these conversations with people about what happened on that show, that a majority of people don't value my child. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay, that's a tough pill to swallow. I have a lot of work to do,
Yes. But
And
thank God we put into the position where we are making a difference. So I just want to encourage you further just to know that you're making a difference beyond what you see, right? Because you're going to impact one person, but that person will go impact others, and your seed will continually live on. So, I'm so proud of the work you're doing. I am so proud of your growth. I love you.
oh, I love you too, and I'm so grateful to talk to you, and I admire you so much, and I'm here for your community in whatever way that I can be. I just believe so much in what you're doing, so much.
Thank you so much. All right, so you have to talk about happiness
Yeah,
with Down syndrome in the community that you built.
yeah. Happiness is Down syndrome is my platform, and it was from God. It was in the middle of the night, and I started singing. I'm a musical theater actor, and I started singing this song from You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Happiness is finding a pencil, knowing a secret, having such fun. It's like this really simple, childlike song, and talking about simple joys like having an ice cream cone, and tying a shoe for the very first time. And I realized that is this journey that I'm on. It's the simple joys. It's the simple pieces of happiness that make this journey so unique and so beautiful and so sort of outside the realm of what people would assume.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to show moms with their babies in happy moments, little moments, feeding the ducks and pushing on the swings and everyday moments. I want to show that. I want to make a video. So I raised money. I made a video, and I happened to talk to someone who was in marketing and strategy and videos. And she said, you need to have a place where people can go that if they see this video on YouTube, because I really wanted something that, like, if they type in Down syndrome, that something like I did, something happy would come up,
Right.
and even if it's 5 things down the road, they're going to be looking, right? And so she said, you need to have a place that people can go. And that's how Happiness is Down syndrome started. It literally started with the stories. I had 12 women in the video, and I had them share all their stories, and it was just their stories. And then more people wanted to tell, and more people and more people and more people. If you build it, they will come. I mean, I talked to moms in India and Dubai and Pakistan, and I mean, they're coming. They're coming. They may not even understand what I'm saying, but like I'll say, if you speak another language, will you say this on Happiness? And I can put it up so that people know they're welcome here. Everybody is welcome here. And there are so many countries where they don't feel seen. They don't have anybody. They don't have resources. They don't have anything. And if they can come to one place on the internet and be like, oh, I may not understand this language, but I know that look on their face, and I think I know what they're doing, and they can reach out to me, and I can go to Google Translate and start talking to them. We've made a connection, right? And so that happens, and it is God's thing, because it has grown so much that I don't even know what to do with it at this point. I'm like, God, what do you want me to do with it? It's literally just a community. It's not a nonprofit, it's not a business, but I know that it's His, and I know that there are people and lives being touched, and it's so outside of me. I am literally the facilitator and the person who brings it to happen, but it is it's God's way of it's such a sweet thing from Him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, Misty, before we go, I would love to have you speak to the parents about taking care of themselves. And so many parents experience caregiver burnout, and they just go, never taking care of themselves. What do you do to make sure that your mental health is intact and you practice self-care, and then, also give them advice to do so?
Well, it's funny you're asking me this now, because we were sick for the entire month of October and literally did not leave our house. And I was thinking, I had a lot of time to think, and I had a lot of time to realize what I have not been doing and what I've been doing too much of. And I think the number one thing to remember is that we are not, I think a lot of people outside of the disability community label us as like, you're super mom. I could never do that. You're a saint, right? Like all these things, all these catchphrases that we hear, and people mean it well, but it's not true. We are everyday people with limitations. And yes, we've been given more knowledge than maybe the average Joe because we've had to, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the same needs as somebody who doesn't have as many demands. And so I really had to look in the mirror and say, what can I let go of? And I found a few things that I could let go of, and some of them were real sacrifices. My husband and I just got rid of our second car because I wanted to stop the job that I was working, the part-time job that I was working, and find more stuff online that I could invest in, and whatever, because we are very much a paycheck to paycheck family, and we have a tight budget. So we got rid of our second car, and we're like, okay, what are some other things we can cut so that I can be home, that when everything happens at the same time and we're all sick, that I can be here, that I can really be here, and that I can take the time for me. So for me, it's looking in the mirror and seeing what I can do without so that I can ultimately have more,
Wow, that's deep.
Can I surrender to ultimately have more? And I found those things. And I guess my recommendation to anybody would just be, that's going to look different for everyone. But to remember that some short-term sacrifices or short-term changes to help the overall trajectory are a really important thing to look at. And if we all sit down and think about things, there are things we can say no to. There are things we can let go of. And not because, oh, poor us, but no, I care. I love myself and my family. And so I'm going to do this for ultimate victory.
That's right. That's really good. One small change. For me, it's been Mental Health Monday. Every Monday I'm screaming, Mental Health Monday. And I shut out the world. It sounds crazy, but it helps. I don't do anything. I don't do work. My kids know now. Anything extra you want me to bring you to your friend's house or the gym, or no, not on Mondays. Anything. Now my husband knows it's your mental health day because I was at my limit. And if I did nothing about it, we wouldn't be happy here because I wouldn't have time. And I chose Monday.
Has it helped you?
I love it. Oh, tremendously. I also have therapy on Monday as well. So it really is a time of reflection and just loving on me. I don't always go anywhere. I don't always have to spend money, but it has helped tremendously.
That's amazing.
Tremendously. So
I'm a huge proponent of therapy as well. So just throw that out there. Have someone to talk to.
So where can the listeners find you, Misty?
Happiness is Down syndrome, just as it sounds. Misty Con Snyder, which is just my name. And Misty Con Snyder, that platform is more about reflecting on my journey, specifically with Jed, where happiness is a community page. So I'm sharing the stories of other people with a little bit of us in it too. And I am on TikTok. I'm not as good about TikTok, but I am on it. And that's also Misty Con Snyder. And if you want to check out the video I was talking about, you can go to YouTube and just type in Happiness is Down Syndrome, and that video will come up. I'm also in production for a new one this week. We're making a new one with a song I wrote. And that'll be out soon. And exciting thing. We'll see. It's like an adventure. Like I never know what's next, right?
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry for keeping you so long. It was so good, but okay, we have to wrap up. So you guys follow Misty on social media and check out everything that she is doing with her precious baby boy. And don't forget, you always have the option to choose joy. Bye-bye.